dancing in the fire, lapping flames grow ever higher. Tongue of toad and wing of bat, mixed within this bubbling vat. Raven's claw and serpent's scale, dragon's blood and scorpion's tail. A plague of nightmares I invoke, to rise up from the ash and smoke. Spider's web and eye of newt, viper's venom and mandrake root. Hearken ye to my commands, come forth to haunt these withered lands. Unleashed from depths of blackest night, slither, crawl, and take to flight. And in the darkest midnight hour, all gather round the witch's tower.
Children of the night. We are the denizens of the dark, cloaked in blackest shadow. We are the fallen angels, soaring through ebon skies upon ravens' wings. We are the wolves that prowl the midnight hours to prey upon the harmless. We are the descendants of the dragon's blood, the keepers of the ancient flame. We are the chosen ones, who dare to explore the mysteries of the unseen realms. We are legion, for we are many, and united, we cannot be vanquished.
Continuation of the topic of the astral realm, which is a remnant universe of existence before our Big Bang that formed our universe. Its fundamental laws of quantum reality are based on a two-dimensional perspective of, from what I can tell, two basic governing forces. Those of emotional and of elemental. It was their belief that death of the physical body was only a phase one goes through in the total span of their existence. When the body dies, it is the emotional attachments that dictate the lifespan of one's astral form. For example, you have two men who lived different lives. One man lived a life of countless sins, held convictions against others, and was racked with feelings of regret and grief from a long and tough life. Now one would think he would be given the short straw in the afterlife, but it is just the opposite. These scenarios secure his opportunity for a longer living spiritual form. The more emotions that secure the memory of him within the minds of the living, and their stronger the emotional effect within their minds, the longer his spiritual form will be capable of maintaining its integrity.
Many people indulge the foolish custom of regularly visiting the cemetery where the body has been interred. A little analysis will show that this is only another evidence of our materialistic modes of thought, and the custom serves to perpetuate emotions that should never have existed. We cannot, of course, think too often nor too tenderly of those who have passed on, but we should do nothing that leads us to think of them as being dead, or being far away. The fact that they are alive and well and happy and near should constantly fill the mind, and all that, in nearly all cases, will be perfectly true if we do not foolishly destroy that peace of mind with our selfish sorrow. The advocates of cremation have a strong argument in the fact that the preservation of the body for a time, whether in a tomb or a grave, tends to keep grief alive. When the body is reduced to ashes, the delusion that the body is somehow the man seems to have less of a material basis. Visits to a tomb or grave are unfortunate, not alone because they renew grief through thinking upon it and thus cause great distress to those for whom we mourn, but also because the environment of a cemetery is one of the worst possible for the sorrowing. It is a dismal park of concentrated griefs where each mourner accentuates the emotional distress of all others. There is but one sensible attitude to take toward those who have just passed on, to think of them as living a joyous, busy life and at least calling on us daily, even though most of us are not sensitive enough to be conscious of the fact. We should try to realize the truth of the matter and then readjust our habits to fit the facts. The average person who is afflicted with the erroneous ideas still so common, is doing an enormous amount of injury and is bringing into the lives of the very people he loves a depression of which he little dreams, and which he can change to vivid pleasure by always thinking cheerfully of them and sending them daily thoughts of peace and serenity. Chapter 4, Reincarnation. The earth is simple compared to a human being. Then, it has required ages to evolve the Earth to its present stage. How long did it take to evolve the wonderfully complex mental and emotional nature of the human being that inhabits the Earth? Look at an infant the day it is born. Study its face. One might as well search the surface of a squash for some indication of intelligence. But wait only a little while and you shall have evidence not merely of intelligence but of emotions possible only to the highest order of life. Clearly, here is something not evolved within a brief period from a mass of material atoms. The swift change from the vacuity of the infant mind to the intellectual power of the adult in the fraction of a century is not the creation of something but its manifestation, the coming through into visible expression of that which already exists, the soul, the consciousness, consisting of the whole of the mental and emotional nature, which has been built up through thousands of years of evolution, is coming once more to rebirth, to visible expression in a material body. The body is, of course, but the new physical instrument of the old soul. An instrument, as certainly as the violin is an instrument and a vehicle for the musician's expression. At every turn our materialistic conceptions mislead us and prevent the perception of nature's truth. It is because we think of the body as being actually the person, that it seems improbable that an old soul has entered the infant body. We think of the power and intelligence of an old soul and then look at the baby and find no indication of such things. But that is only because the baby body is such a new and undeveloped instrument that it is at first useless, and only slowly can it be brought under control of the soul and made to express its intelligence and power. The body is a growing instrument, not a completed one. Let us suppose that musical instruments grow as physical bodies do. Suppose there was a time when the piano was keyless, as a baby is toothless. Suppose that sounding boards have a period of immaturity and that the whole mechanism of the instrument is in a state that can only be characterized as infantile. If a master musician attempts to play on such a piano, his performance would by no means be an indication of his ability. A competent critic who could hear the performance but not see the musician would promptly declare that no really great musician was touching the keys. And that is precisely the mistake we make in assuming that the immature body of an infant is capable of expressing the intellectual power of the old soul, or, to put it differently, denying that a returned old soul is in possession of the infant body simply because there is no physical plain evidence of the fact. If pianos slowly grew to maturity, then only when the instrument was mature could the master musician give a practical demonstration of his skill, and only when the physical body has reached its maturity can the soul that is using it fully express itself. In the early years of the physical body, the soul is only very partially expressed through it. The entrance of the consciousness into the physical world is slow and gradual, beginning some months before the birth of the physical body and continuing for a period of several years. The soul, or consciousness, is engaged in the process of anchoring itself in the physical world. For a long time the center of consciousness remains above the material plane, and during the early years of childhood the consciousness is divided between the astral and physical worlds, with the result that the child is often somewhat confused and brings fragments of astral consciousness into physical life. When the physical body is about 7 years old, the consciousness may be said to be centered on the physical plane, but only when the body and brain of the soul's new instrument are mature has the opportunity come for the fullest expression. Some of the difficulties commonly associated in the mind with the thought of the pre-existence and rebirth of the soul will disappear if we do not lose sight of the fact that the soul is a center of consciousness, which is always conscious somewhere, but which very gradually shifts its focus from plane to plane. Its permanent home is in that body of subtle matter drawn about the ego in the higher levels of the heaven world. From that point it sends energies outward and draws about itself in the lower levels of the mental world a body, or vehicle of consciousness, that is not permanent but which will serve the purpose of functioning for a period on that plane. Downward or outward again the energies are sent, building about the center of consciousness on the astral plane a temporary body of astral matter, temporary in the same sense that the physical body is temporary, and which shall serve the consciousness in the astral, or emotional world, during the whole of the physical plane life and for some time afterward. Still outward, or downward, the soul sends its energies till the material world is reached, when it begins to function partially, and very feebly, through the infant physical body. The soul during that period may be likened to a man who, at the close of a busy day, retreats to the privacy of his fireside and goes thoughtfully over the day's events. He seeks out of memories record all the blunders he has made and by careful analysis fortifies himself against a repetition of such mistakes in the future. As he reviews the record, he sees with satisfaction the good points it contains and he resolves to be even more helpful to others on the morrow. He outlines in his mind the affairs of the next day and determines to make the most of his opportunities. The result of all this is that he will begin the active life again on the following morning, not only rested and refreshed for the day's program but at a somewhat advanced mental and moral level. He starts wiser and stronger than he was on the previous day, and even so it is with the soul, the real man. The long centuries of blissful life that elapse before the return here, give opportunity for the complete digestion and assimilation of all the experiences, great and small, of the period that closed with the death of the physical body. On its next visit to the physical plane the soul will begin at a higher point than in the previous life because the period of assimilation will have transmuted past experience into wisdom and a better brain will express that wisdom in the following incarnation. Even so does the soul come, seeking in the rude material world the experience that will give it great wisdom. It also lives in a temporary house, called a body, that time will destroy. That body serves the same purpose for the soul that the temporary hut does for the naturalist. This spiritual body may be called the permanent residence of the soul, from which its energies are sent outward through the mental and astral into the physical body. Each old soul brings back and expresses through the new physical body the accumulated harvests of past lives. For the time being the soul's evolution lies on the physical plane where certain lessons are to be learned. After the early years of childhood are over the consciousness is firmly anchored here, where the chief work is to be done, during the hours of the waking life. During sleep the ego temporarily abandons the physical body and functions in the astral body in the astral world. The material body sleeping here is merely a deserted and empty vehicle, magnetically connected with the soul, awaiting its return. The reincarnating process by which the soul evolves is somewhat analogous to the growth of a young physical body. The process consists of alternating periods of objective and subjective activity. How does the body of a child grow? It consumes food, the objective activity. It then digests and assimilates it, the subjective procedure. These periods must alternate or there can be no growth, because neither alone is the complete process. The one is the complement of the other. So it is in the evolution of the soul by reincarnation. The experience of life is the food on which the soul grows. The physical plane existence is the objective period in which the food is gathered. At death the man passes into the invisible realms where the subjective process is carried on. He digests and assimilates his experiences and the gist of these experiences is stored in the causal body. What food is to the growth of the physical body, experience is to the growth of the causal body. The same law governs mental and the moral growth, as it operates in our daily affairs. A young man is in college. How does his intellect grow? By precisely the same process of, page 150, alternating periods of objective and subjective activity. In the classroom the instructor puts a mathematical problem on the blackboard and explains it. With the outward senses of sight and hearing, aided by pencil and notebook, the student gathers the food for mental growth. This period of objective activity comes to an end and he then retires to the privacy of his room and there the subjective period begins. He deeply thinks over the problem. His material, the food for mental growth, is only a few notes that serve to keep the problem in his mind. At first all that they signify is not obvious, but as he turns the various points over and over in his mind their significance becomes clearer and fuller. It is the subjective process of digestion. Precisely so it is with the reincarnating soul. In the interval between incarnations it so assimilates the experiences of the last physical life that it comes to rebirth with added abilities which enable it to take higher and more difficult lessons than it could previously master. The purpose of evolution, then, is clear. Man is a god in the making, not actually, but only potentially a god, a being to whom all wisdom, perfect compassion and unlimited power are possible, and by the process of evolution he changes the latent into the active. He is at first only an individualized center of consciousness within the all-consciousness, a mere fragment of the divine life. His relationship to the Supreme Being is something like that of a seed to its plant, a product of it that has latent within it all the characteristics of the plant and the power to become a plant. It is not a plant and neither is man a god, but when the seed has sent out a sprout and taken root in the soil it is a plant in the making, and when the human being has begun to evolve his latent spiritual qualities he is a god in the making. The theosophical view is that man is essentially divine.